Okay, so the engine's out, and what happened was we had a compression ring failure. This compression ring should be in one piece. The end gap for this one was actually good. You can see there's a little chunk missing off of that on the right side. I did find that piece and took it out. But obviously with this one broken and the damage it did to the piston, it doesn't matter that the ring gaps on that and the oil scraping ring were good, because as you can see right here, and I do apologize for the lighting. I'm trying to sell my house, so I got most of my equipment out of the garage right now, including the lights. There's this big notch here where that ring got pounded in there, and then it pinched this one, and there's a little bit of damage over here along the top where the oil scraping ring is. As you can see, the piston skirt here is all scuffed to hell. A couple pieces of carbon got knocked loose up here, but thankfully nothing got on top of the piston and nothing smashed the combustion part of that head. If I remember correctly, these heat spots here and this heat spot here, you see it better this way, these heat points here, I believe that was factory. I don't think that's because of damage. You know, this is all pressed together, so you'd have to heat those parts. So if I remember correctly, that's fine. What happened, because this compression ring failed, is compression got into the crankcase, and when you put pressure in the crankcase, it vents through this tube, which goes into the air box, and then that allows you to re-burn oil fumes and things escaping out of the crankcase. But because it was pumping oil and compression through there, a lot of the oil came out of the air box drain, which is up underneath here. There's a little tube, and then there's a little flapper that opens when that tube's full. It got all over the swing arm. A little bit of it got burned, obviously, because it's going to the air box. Some of it's going back into the engine, but which is, I mean, just regular combustion will cause carbon buildup. But I think this is severely dirty because of burning oil. I was doing 65, 70 down the highway when this happened. I didn't even notice until it was obviously too late. I was going down the highway and I heard a little bit of noise. I couldn't really tell what it was. And then a little bit later, the bike slowed down and I pulled the clutch in and let it back out, and it seemed to be running fine. And because I was going down the highway in traffic, I didn't hear it knocking. But when I pulled up to the stop sign, it was knocking bad, obviously because it had a broken compression ring and one locked up compression ring. Here's the cylinder. You can see the heat marks on the side there. Obviously that's to the rear here, where that skirt was hammering into it. Try and get the angle here so you guys can see it. So it's all scuffed to hell. That sleeve is junk. So I could potentially get a new piston and re-sleeve this, but I think I'm just going to go back to the stock engine because I have those parts laying around, and all I'll need is a couple of gaskets and nuts and some silicone to put it back together. So that's my plan, is to put stock engine configuration back together rather than buying expensive aftermarket parts. That way I can see if the rest of the engine is still good, or if I sent too much metal through it and it's junk. If this is a total loss, what will happen is I'll either find another 250 engine like on eBay, or a CB300R, or a CB500X motor. The 300's basically a direct bolt-in with a little bit of plug changes. The 500 twin is obviously a fabrication project, but that uses the same fuel pump as this tank. It actually fits in there. Guys have been using the factory radiator and factory air box with that 500 engine, and it works fine. So those are my options. Gonna try and rebuild it as a factory 250 first to see if it'll even live. So, and again, this is number 130. It's a B&B cycle restoration cylinder, And I do not blame B&B Cycle for bad parts. This is aftermarket parts. Shit happens. B&B Cycle doesn't make these rings. B&B Cycle does not make this piston. All B&B Cycle does is takes a factory cylinder and does a little bit of machining to it and resleeves it. The B&B Cycle parts did not fail. I believe it was JE pistons. You'd have to go back and look at my big bore install videos. But the piston and the piston rings failed. B&B Cycle's parts held up fine. It was not their fault. It was the piston rings that failed. Okay, so don't be afraid to buy from B&B. They have a good product. They are not at fault. I want to make that very clear. I don't want to badmouth somebody in the motorcycle industry. Their parts were fine. But, yeah, piston failure, compression ring failure, bad noises. So, yeah, I mean, it sucks. Hopefully I didn't send a bunch of metal through here. I still need to take the oil filter off and tear that apart. But looking at the oil, there was more metal in it than usual. But, I mean, obviously, because I took all kinds of metal out of here. You can see there's the heat marks that it made. So, yeah, failed compression ring. Chunk out of the end of that one. The oil ring was actually untouched. It was a little pinched because there was some metal hammering back and forth here, but yeah, that's what happened. I'm down to 0 bikes now because obviously this one isn't running, and Goldwing needs fork parts because of this should not be 2 separate pieces. It should be one piece like this. I thought I could just throw seals on it, but then I found that. So 0 motorcycles right now. Totally sucks, but there it is. I'll let you guys know once I get this put back together as a factory 250 and what happens. Thanks for watching.